Okay, so we are carrying on from where we left off. I'm going to do a bit of a recap at the beginning of this, and then we're going to talk about a couple of things we've covered this week. Um, Talk about a little bit like what we're going to be covering tomorrow. And I'm also a little treat for those who stick around to the end. There's a very, very cool thing I'm going to show you, which is really going to help us in the early stages. It's not got massive like end product implications, but it's very good for when we're in this grey box phase. It's just a nice thing. I think it's very, very cool. And we'll talk about that when we're done. So I'll move myself down here. I'm actually going to move myself down here. There we go. Lovely. Cool. So we've got our environment here. This is pretty much where I left off in the last video, obviously. So this isn't obviously the cabin scene I've shown you where I've got a lot further in, the one I've been doing in my own time. This is this one. So I've got some basic doors and some basic windows in my walls. Cool. So let's actually go back and remind ourselves how we can make basic doors, basic walls very, very fast, very, very cleanly. Obviously, back in Maya, these aren't meant to be the final assets. What we're doing here is basically prefabbing, we're mocking out, we're sketching out some basic forms. Because we just don't know, we can't decide true end game kind of shapes, the layouts, the kind of thing until we start getting assets in. So you can't, it's hard to imagine a window there if there's no window there. So I've got a basic wall here. This is where, if we're dealing with our 2 meter by, I think mine's 3 meter tall wall section, be it a window or a door, whatever. This is where we start off. So I'm going to make a few variations. I'm going to make a door, a single window, and then I'm going to make what could be a double window. So it would be a 4 meter wall kind of thing. So let's just do a single basic window because that's the easiest one to do. So with my wall here, I've obviously duplicated it off the main one. So this is just a duplicate. Control D to do that. I've snapped it to the grid, holding X obviously, making sure the pivot point is the bottom right, the bottom left hand corner, and my pivot point down here, my axis is pointing downwards. So I know that it's all good when I import it. I'm not going to have like things in different orientations. Pardon me, I've got a bit of a cold also, I might be sniffing and coughing and all sorts of sneezing, so do excuse that. Okay, so let's make a window. I'm going to make it in the middle of these faces on both sides, obviously, so I need to be in face mode. Okay, you'll often hear me say, as the weeks go on, like literally say stuff out loud. When you know you got to do something, talk the process out loud. I'm going to extrude faces. This is like not necessarily what you're doing as an end thing, but the process you're doing, the thing you're about to do. So I'm going to extrude in those faces to make a window. Okay, I'm going to extrude because that's the function I'm going to do, and then I'm going to do it to a face. Okay, that's the component, the element I'm going to do it to. So I'll hold right click, go to face. I'm just going to click the front one, shift click the back one, just so I've got those two. Hit extrude. We should all know where extrude is now. Right here. Extrude, and I'm just going to use the offset to bring it in a little bit at first. I just want to expose it, so I know where it is. And then I'm going to immediately go back to I'm not going to use these tools anymore. I'm immediately just going to press R for my scale tool, go back to this, and I'm going to start scaling in, either height-wise or width-wise, just to get a kind of window. So this is going to be not a long window. This is going to be a normal, it's going to be at waist height. In fact, I'm going to pause the video. I'm going to bring in Manny because that's obviously better to explain when you've got a Manny in there to measure against. And we're back. Okay, so we've got that little extruded face in there. So we selected both the front and the back faces. We hit extrude, and just use the offset just to bring it in a little bit so we can visually see it. And that's it. And then I just pressed R, back to my scale, scaled it in a little bit, and then just using W, move tool, to move it up or down or whatever. I can get an idea about the window size using Manny. So I'm going to go, maybe windows like that. So I'm thinking mid waist height, hip height, and kind of a little bit taller than Manny, so like this. So it's going to be a relatively big window. And I'm going to give myself a little bit of space on the sides, obviously. Again, just using the scale to bring it into roughly what I want. Making sure, obviously, both sides are selected. So we've got the aperture, we've got the hole where the window is going to be, the void, the hole in the wall, but obviously there's still that plane in the middle, so I'm going to just delete it, hit and delete. Not a backspace, remember. We need to remember to separate off backspace for another function. Just to keep everything nice and clean. Okay. So now I've got that hole in the wall there. That's great. But obviously we can see through into the inside of the geometry. So we're just going to fill it in. And that's using bridge. So I'm going to bridge edges. I'm going to fill in these edges by using bridge. Okay, I'm going to use bridge, that's my function, and I'm going to use edge, that's my component. So I'm going to select both sides like that, and I'm going to hit bridge. So that bridges that. I go to the next one, hit bridge, go to the next one, hit bridge, go to the next one, hit bridge. And there we go, that's nice and bridged. Now, in the initial stages, I am going to be doing things a little bit longer because obviously we're needing to learn the tools, and repetition is the best way to learn these. But we could have done that in basically one selection pass and then one click. So I'll do that for those who are a bit more confident with the 3D. If you're not confident with the 3D yet, I do recommend just doing the repetition until you really get to understand. Okay, you get your hands on the tools. But to do this very quickly, I'm just going to double click one side of the window. So you see if I double click, it selects all the way around that loop. And then I'm going to shift double click on the opposite side. So it's going to click, it's going to select all that loop. And then I'm going to hit bridge. Now that does it all in one go. Cool. And then that's our wall. Sorry, that's our window. So how easy was that? That's a few clicks. Oh, someone's firing off fireworks. If you hear bangs in the background. So I'll do that all from the beginning again. I'll go back, Control Z. Right. Oh. I'll just bring in a new, I'll do it from scratch. So I duplicate, Control D, making sure that obviously the pivot point shouldn't move if this is our original wall we extruded. And all I've done is I moved it directly backwards, not off to the side. Yes, I have moved these off to the side, but my walls I've just moved backwards. So I'll make sure that I've duplicated it. I grab the duplicate, there you go. And then I hold X, and I'm just going to drag it to the center of the grid. Remember, X is snapped to grid. And then I'm just going to hold right click, go to face mode, select the front and back. Hit extrude once. And just use the offset to bring it in, just to expose those edges. There you go. And then just press R, normal R from a normal scale tool. I'm not going to use what's on that gimbal because they don't quite work well for us. And I'm just going to, scale it in as much as I want, scale it down, and then lift it up a little bit using the translate tool. That's W. To about what a window's size and height as I want. Hit delete. And then I'm going to bridge the inside by selecting both sides, the edges of both sides of this void. So them, and then bridge, and we're done. Cool. So now that's our window, and I have already done one, so I'm not going to export it, but I've got our window here. Cool. So I could duplicate that now, obviously name it, this would be SM, static mesh, underscore, window, underscore, if this was the actual second window I'd be making, I'd call it B. Okay. So yeah, I duplicate it off, move it backwards after I've exported it. Now what I'm going to do is use the exact same geometry, now that I've duplicated it, so duplicate, move it back, this is my nice one. There we go. Whoop. So that's that. That's already been exported. This one I'm going to turn into basically a double wide window. Just using pretty much the same tools we've just done, except, actually, you know what? We're not even going to use extrude. That's it. And it's really, really easy. So what I'm going to do is go to face mode, and I'm going to decide what side I want to delete, because I'm going to delete basically a side of this window. I'm going to delete this side here. So the opposite side to where the anchor is down here. And I'm just going to make sure I grab all the faces on the inside there. I don't need the top, I don't need the bottom, and obviously I don't need the left hand side. So I'm just going to drag a selection box just across the middle there. Selects all them. Check that I've got everything selected, I should do. If you've got anything not selected, select it. If you've got something selected you don't want to select, deselect it by holding shift and clicking it. When you've done that, I'm just going to hit delete. Boom. Cool. So now we've got basically one half of a double window. But the problem is, when we did that extrusion, if I find the other one, boop, when we did that extrusion, the edges are now on some kind of diagonal angle, which means when we delete this, we're going to have a bit of a crooked wall on one side. So my next job is to straighten the wall up. The top and bottom vertexes, they're perfectly fine. They're in the right position. You can even see that they're right on the grid, because obviously we snapped it at the beginning. This is why having those really good initial shapes are perfect is good, because now, boom, the top and the bottom vertexes, they're in the right position. The problem, children, are here. These ones and these ones, the inside, because they were obviously attached to the face that was extruded inwards. But I've got both those selected now, and they should be perfectly in line with each other. And all I'm going to do is press W for my movement tool, hold X, and I'm going to drag it until there you go. So now I'm snapping to grid. I'm not dragging from the middle because obviously that does all the different angles at once, and I don't want that. I only want one axis. I want the Z axis. So I'm holding X and I'm dragging until it snaps into place. Boom. And that's done. Almost. Obviously we need to fill in this void. Again, those are just bridges. We've done it already. So I'm going to select both sides. Now we can only do one at a time here because these are actually physically separated away from each other. The reason we could do the first initial bridge when we made that single window is because they were kind of relating to each other. Because I've got a hole here and I got a hole here, but the hole was kind of like one single hole. It was the inside of the window. Anyway, now what I'm going to do is bridge the top bit. There you go. Bridge the bottom bit. There we go. Boom, that's it. And now we've got a double window. So what I'm going to do is call this SM window B. Window underscore B. Because this is the second window. And I've said this many times. It's good to do these in really, really basic forms at first, because we can make sure that, you know, we can try the ideas we want to try. Maybe we do want a double size window, or a longer window anyway. It doesn't need to be this wide. We might want a double window, but then we might think later on, actually, you know what? No, I don't want a double window. If we spend ages modeling it in detail with all nice, frills, and then we UV it, and then we texture it, and then we go, bah, I don't want it. It's kind of wasted time. So with that, I'm going to export that as SM underscore window underscore B. No, SM underscore window underscore, wrong. SM underscore window underscore B. Boom. Now that's sent out. So that, boom, already we've made 2 windows. And we're only going to make one of them because we can actually do some dirty tricks to make this be the opposite side. So, move that back. I'm going to make a doorway now, so I'm going to grab that single wall again, duplicate it, move the duplicate, hold X, move it to the middle of the grid. And this one, it's very similar to what we've just done. We could do the extrusion inwards if we want to, just like we did with the window. And essentially, I'll do it quite fast. If we do the extrusion like we did last time, then we offset it in, and then we use a scale. So I'm going to get the width of the door, using Manny as a guide. So if I just drag Manny in front of it, whoop, let's turn the wireframe on. There you go. Make sure I've got the front and the back selected again. And then I can kind of scale how tall is the door. About that. Like that. So that's a rough approximate of my door. I can then hit delete to delete obviously the void. Delete the bottom, because this is essentially the exact same shape as our double-sided window we've just made. It's just a little bit thinner because it's the door, and also it's flipped on its axis, so the void, the bit we've just deleted, is at the bottom, because that's obviously where it touches the floor. And then I can just grab those problem vertexes at the bottom, like there and there, hold X, snap it to grid, boom, and then I can fill in the void. So boop, boop, bridge that, boop, boop, bridge that, boop, boop, bridge that, and don't forget underneath, boop, boop, bridge that, boop, boop, bridge that. We always want to make sure we have our meshes nice and what we call watertight. And that's our door. And we can still mess with it. So I can just go in there, grab the vertexes in vertex mode, just on the inside. So all I'm doing is just looking from the front and just dragging a box so I encompass all those vertexes. And I can use like the scale tool just to scale it in or out if I want to. Make a nice wide door. This looks like a nice, if we were doing somewhere with like a single, your normal kind of elevator door, that, it's a perfect size right there. But I'm just going to use, obviously, it's like a cabin door, so boom. And then that's my door. Nice and done. So then I can export that. I have another version of doing that right here. You'll see that the geometry, the wireframe is slightly different on both of them. Both are perfectly fine. I have my tastes, which is this one because it's nice and simple. But there might be reasons why you want this one. This is all determined by either your technical director of a studio, the general kind of way the game's been modeled and made, because maybe they might need to do things a certain way. So this one, again, this is both perfectly fine. This one is slightly more optimized because there's fewer faces. This one, it's an extra 4 faces. It doesn't really matter too much. But to make this one, oops, I don't want to delete it. I want to just move it back into place. Whoop, there we go. To make that one, what I'm going to do is, again, duplicate the wall, move it to the middle. This time I'm going to use a couple of tools. Well, tools we've already used, the connect tool. So first of all, I'm going to make an edge going horizontally across it. That's going to be my, the top of my door frame. So I'm going to go to edge mode, and I want to select all the edges going through the middle. Again, move your camera position, and you can drag a line through the middle. You can also manually, holding shift, go around and select all the edges. Or you can even click, shift, double click, and it goes selects all the way around. 3 different ways of doing the exact same thing. Mesh tools connect. Boom, right there. So we've got that green line. That obviously is a preview. It's like, do you want this green line? Do you want it to be in this position? Cool, yeah. Cool, there we go. And then I press enter there, or you can press W, or select any kind of key really to confirm it. And I'm just going to drag it up in the y-axis to about where I want the door height to be, the door jamb. Cool. And then what I'm going to do is select, I'm going to create vertical edges to create the void again. So I'm going to, again, go to edge mode, and then I'm just going to drag down and select all the horizontal edges like this. So in the process of cutting like this, making connections and edge loops and stuff, you're always cutting perpendicular or a 90-degree angle against what you selected. So if I want to select something going horizontal, if I want to create something going horizontal, I need to select the vertical edges because I'm cutting them in half. If I want to make something going horizontal, sorry, no, yeah, I got myself confused then. If I want to make edges going horizontal, I need to select the vertical edges because I'm cutting them in half. If I want to make something going vertical, I need to select the horizontal edges because I'm cutting those in half. And then again, mesh tools connect. This time I'm going to do the middle mouse drag left and right. So holding down middle mouse, and I can drag left and right to increase. Like that. Cool. Now, you can press enter to confirm this, and then you could use your scale tool like that. But I'm going to introduce us to another little thing. Again, if you're feeling spicier, feel free to do this. If you're not, if you're like, oh, that's a little bit, I'm still learning the software, do it the way that we've done it before. But I can actually interact with these edges inside the toolkit, inside the software a bit more. So the very top right hand side of the screen, I've got a, make sure I'm still recording, yes. I've got a little hammer with 3 dots. This little hammer with 3 dots right there. Whoop. Now if I click that, it opens up the tool settings. And these will be different for tool, for functions, all that kind of stuff. Some are going to be massive functions everywhere because that particular function or tool can do a lot of things. This one, really simple, just 3 options. And we're only going to be using one of them. So this is what we interact with. And there's a little nice drop down to show you how to do, the hotkey stuff. So feel free to drop that down. But what I've got here is segments. So that's what we normally do. That's my segments. So you can actually input numbers if you want there. But my segments, right there. Slide, that moves it across from side to side. If it's 50%, if it's 0.5, it's in the middle. If it's 1, it's all the way off to one side. If it's as close as it can get. If it's 0 or 0.01, it's all the way up to the left. But we want it in the middle, so it's 0.5. And then pinch. Now this is the one we want to use. So I'm going to click pinch, so it's high, so it's selected. And then again, middle mouse drag in the scene. I can increase and decrease this. Now this is quite nice because you can actually have a lot of control over, the size, the width, all that kind of jazz. So I can use that to get a door frame in there, and then I can press enter to confirm that. There we go, and then I've got my door again. 2 ways of doing the same thing, keeping it easy. Now we've got a similar shape that we had with the window and with the other door we made. We've got the door is now kind of like there, and also underneath. Can't forget underneath. So what I'm going to do is, again, have those selected in face mode because I'm deleting faces. Press delete, and then we're going to have void. This time all we're going to do is just, again, bridge the inside. Sorry. But there you go. Bridge. Hey, we're done. So 2 ways of making the exact same thing. You can also do that for windows. So I'll quickly just make a window, doing the exact same function. So I'm going to, again, Mesh Tools Connect. I'm going to click the little settings box there, and then I can say, okay, obviously 2 segments because I want to have top of the window, bottom of the window. And then I can slide it, and then I can, okay, we're going to slide it up a little bit, and then I'm going to use a pinch to pinch it in a little bit. Maybe one like that. Cool. We will confirm. And then I select the edges going horizontally, because obviously then I want to put the settings in here. Now, it does remember any settings you've got here, so now my slide is actually off. My pinch and slide are off. I don't really want them. It worked obviously in vertically because you're moving the window up and down, but we want to put these windows pretty much in the middle of these walls, again, for now. So what I'm going to do is just hit Reset Tool at the top. It basically puts it back to settings, default settings, and then I will just middle mouse drag to add a segment, and then I can pinch to make it wider. Hit Enter, and done. Delete the center. Oops, don't do that. Make sure you're always hovering over the right object when you go into, your context menu. You can shut that down now. Your context menu, remember, is this, also called the radial menu, selection menu, hotbox. There's a few names for it. And I'm going to, again, select all the edges on the inside. I want a bridge. Oops, not that one. Bridge, and we're good. Look at that. So 2 objects made in 2 different ways. Pardon me. Awesome. So obviously I would then import them into the engine, and all good. Making the walls and the floors, basic ones, really easy. If I wanted to do something similar to this, hypothetically, if we wanted a like a big piece of floor where you could see through it, or maybe the middle is void because you're going to put something in there later on, you can do the exact same thing we just done. Luckily, our floors are all flat, and we can have fun with the textures to make it look cool. Cool, so that's it. Boom. Easy. So what I'm going to do is jump back to the engine, and I'm going to open that folder with all my gubbins in. Oh, I need to check what folder I'm actually exporting it to. There we go. Might as well copy paste that address. Put it to this window. Boom. There we go. There we go. So I'm just going to drag in that new window, B. Yep, so just double check. It will be unticked, but just because this is a new session, just want to double check. But yeah, material, import material, turn that off. Boot it up. There we go. So now I can decide, okay, maybe I want a double window here. So I'm going to select that. I'm going to drag this in, or you can delete and drag this into the scene and, set it in place like that. But I want a double window, so I'm going to drag this. I'm going to, bring that window in, delete the other side of the wall. I'm going to duplicate this over like this. So I'm dragging it over a little bit too far. I've got my step snaps to 100 up here, so now it's nice big movements. So obviously it's inside the wall. That's not great. I want to make sure. I need to make it the opposite way. All I'm going to do. There we go. Position the camera better. All I want to do now is just use scale, and I'm just going to scale in the x-axis inwards. See how it gets smaller? So I'm going to scale. And then if I go past the middle of that scale, it starts reversing the scale. So I can go up. There we go. So then I've got a double window. I've got a big window for the price of one small window. Now it's good to do this in the initial phases when we're doing this, because we're only playing around, we're only playing guesswork. Where this is a bit of a problem is when we're like UVing and texturing later on, because I've literally mirrored the geometry. Even the texture then will be mirrored, which means you might have like a really weird, almost like a Rorschach test shape in the middle, and it's going to be like a bit to players. So if I do keep a double window in there at the end, I'm going to make it probably out of a 4 meter wide window, 4 meter wide wall, or I'll just do 2 versions of it. I'll do a version which is obviously like this one, and then I'll do a version of it which is this one. A couple of different ways we can do it. Cool. So yeah, we've added a bit more in there. I'm going to make my pillar now because that's something we talked about. So make my pillar. How do I do that? Well, it's just a cube, innit? So I'm going to do a cube. Just bring it into the middle of the grid. I don't want it really small. Bit of a cube like that. Now, how big do I want this? We talked about this in class. I think half a meter for one of the big pillars is a pretty good size. Again, we can change all that later on. Now, for this, I'm even going to add a little bit more detail than I normally would at this point. Again, just to kind of get us a bit more excited, get us rolling a little bit. But getting our dimensions now. So I've just made the object. So in my channel box to the side, yeah, I should have this open, the Polycube 1, initial settings option open. If you don't see this, you'll have inputs and you'll have Polycube 1 or Poly whatever 1. Click that Poly 1 or Poly whatever. Depends on what you make, depends how many you've made. And then you get the options, because they're literally just docked inwards a little bit. So my width and my depth are going to be the same, so I'm going to go 50. Yeah, oh, so it's my 50, there we go. And then my height is going to be 300, because it's going to be the exact same height as my wall. That looks good. Again, I'm using Manny as a bit of a guide here. That looks good. D and V, remember D releases the pivot point. V snaps the vertex. So I'm going to D and V, so it's drag my mouse to the bottom, so it's snap into the bottom vertexes of this piece of geometry. And then I move to the middle of the world. So holding X, just drag it in there. Make sure, look underneath, that it is there. It is perfect. I'm going to call this SM Pillar A, because it's the first pillar I've made. Now I'm going to use the same tools I've just used to make my windows and my doors. To make this a little bit more interesting, I'm also going to use another tool we have looked at, just to make it look a little bit nicer. Cool. So what I'm going to do is make my pillars almost have like, it's not a detail, it's not a lip, it's almost like a skirting board at the bottom, a skirting board at the top. When you see it, it makes more sense, obviously. And then I can make those asymmetrical. It might be bigger at the top, and it might be smaller at the bottom. I can make those asymmetrical in a second. Anyway, all I'm going to do is select all the edges going through the middle, because I'm going to cut horizontally across this. So again, I need to select the verticals to cut horizontally. Connect. There you go. So that's already in a pretty good position for me. That's kind of what I want. But I'm going to reset the tool so we go through the functions again. So I'm opening up the toolbox here. In segments, I want to add 2 into there. And in pinch, what I want to do is pinch it out to about there. So because I'm going to make 2 of these, I'm going to make these edges at the top, and then I'm going to make another set that are slightly in as well. And I'm going to start making geometry from that area. And you'll see. Cool. Confirm that, and then I'm going to do that again. So again, selecting all the edges through the edge was right, through the middle. Mesh tools connect, and I'm going to make the pinch even further now. So still 2 segments, but I'm going to make the pinch smaller, because I'm going to have like a bigger section on one like a bigger piece of skirting board, kickboard, and then I'm going to have a little section around the top. So something like that. I'm going to eyeball it in, just, whatever. Cool. So that's looking really nice. So I've got this area at top and bottom, which is going to have a bit of geometry on it. And then I'm going to have this area just above it, which is, again, going to have a bit of geometry on it. Now, I'm going to make 2 versions of these, which pretty much look identical, but they're slightly different, and you'll see why. So I'll just copy one, or I'll duplicate one off like that. This first one, I'm going to do an embossing of these new features. I'm going to bring the features outwards. So I am actually breaking the 50 centimeters square. I'm actually making it bigger than the original shape. And I know we've spoke about bounding boxes, and as long as you don't break that bounding box, it's okay. But sometimes it is okay to break that bounding box if something is like, say, 50 centimeters wide. It's okay to go a little bit out of that for some objects like this, if it's like static mesh stuff. And for anything really, as long as you don't go crazy outside of it, this bounding box is just a good guideline. Okay, so what I'm going to do is just extrude out this information. So what I'm going to do is select the 2 top rings. So in face mode, because I'm extruding faces. So again, I'm going to be using extrude and faces. So I need my face selection. So hold the right click, go to face, click, shift, double click to select all the way around. Again, holding shift still. Click, double click, holding shift again, click, double click. I have to do that now. There you go. And then shift double. Oh, there we go. However you want to do it, just make sure you've got, if you're following this directly, make sure you've got all four sides here like this, as you can see. I've got the top and the one just below it selected, and at the very, very bottom I've got the same thing. I've got the bottom and the one just above it selected. Now with these selected, what I'm going to do is hit extrude, and then just add a little bit of thickness. Just a little bit like that. Just a little bit. Maybe go one whole kind of. Come on. There we go. So I'm going to input one there, keep it nice and clean. So what I've done there is almost like make more material on the outside. So imagine our pillar is made of wood or plaster or whatever. And what I've done here is I've created what looks to be like that plank of wood which is nailed to it on like skirting boards and kickboards. And then I'm going to do the exact same thing but on the very, very bottom one. Because I wanted to extrude both the two rings at the top, the two rings at the bottom together to bring them all in, to bring them all out the same kind of distance. And then I'm going to do the same thing at the bottom. So I'm going to select all these bottom ones, and then at the top, hold shift, click, double click. So make sure I've got both top rings loops selected. I'm going to do it again. So if I just look at the bottom there for guide, extrude, and then I'm going to add a bit of thickness to it, maybe a bit more, maybe 1.5. Yeah, like that. So now what I've got is something like this. It's not completely breaking the bounding box. It's only coming out there literally 2.5 centimeters. That's like that much. So that's not really breaking any bounding boxes. But what we've got is the shape that I want. That's quite nice. So I've got a bit of detail. Now I said I could make this asymmetrical as well. So currently the top and the bottom are the exact same height with the exact same separations between one plank and the other plank. But what I could do is, if I go to vertex mode, I'm just going to grab this section there of vertexes going around. Not the top ones, obviously, just basically these two rings. And why I'm doing that and not doing it in face mode or anything like that is vertexes in simple objects like this are really good just to select. And then that's going to control all this section. So I can move that around like this. So what I'm going to do is, I'm going to move that down, increasing the size of this. And then I'm going to look from the side and just select, make sure I'm checking. And then just select the bottom 8 vertexes and move that down a little bit. So I'm actually adding a little bit of asymmetricality to it. Just enough to make it a bit more interesting. Pardon me. Make sure I'm still recording. I am. So the other one I can do is pretty much the exact same thing, but I'm going inwards this time. So I definitely don't want to break that 50 centimeter by 50 centimeter bounding box. So this time what I'm going to do is select the center faces, and then the hold shift and click, double click to select that one. And then while holding shift, click, double click to select the bottom one. Not selecting the very top loop or the very bottom loop. And then now what I do is extrude, and I bring the thickness in this time. So I said that was like, so this is minus 1.5. We're basically working in reverse this time. So if that was 1.5 outwards for the bottom one on the other pillar, and now I'm going to do is minus 5.1 inwards. Like that. Cool. So that's looking good. And then I just do the middle section. Just the middle of the pillar. Not selecting this middle edge up here, and not selecting this middle, sorry, not edge, faces. And not selecting these middle faces down here. And then hit extrude again, and then that was 1 centimeter inward, so I'm going to go minus 1 on this one. There we go. So what we've got are two pretty much identical pillars. It's just this one maintains the initial girth, let's call it, of the 50 centimeter by 50 centimeter for the main pillar, but the top and the header and the footer are slightly bigger, literally 2.5 centimeters bigger. This one on the left, the header and the footer, they are the half meter by half meter. This time we've just brought in the middle, so it's ever so slightly thinner. It's 2.5 centimeters on all sides thinner. But really, you know, they're not that noticeably different. They're just two different ones. Pros and cons. Aesthetic. You know, if the extrusions were bigger, you'd have to think, okay, is it looking better with the thinner interior of the pillar? So you've got thicker header footers but a thinner pillar, much thinner pillar, or is it you want bigger head and footers, so but they want the pillar to maintain the initial shape? Pros and cons. However, so the one I did last, if I look at the top, it's just a straight up polygon, and at the bottom, it's just a straight up polygon. Nice and simple. On the other one, because I extruded outwards, what extrusion does, it creates new edges every time you extrude, like that. So we have this is basically the footprint of the initial shape, and then we've got this loop here, which was that first extrusion outwards, and then we've got this loop here, which is the second extrusion outwards. You could leave these in because it's literally only 9 faces top and bottom. For me, that's a little bit dirty. I don't really like that too much. I like to make sure my initial meshes are nice and optimized. Now, we don't want to chase optimization like the dragon, like a bad habit. It's just good to keep it in mind. We'll talk more about that as the year goes on. But what I'm going to do, though, is just select all the edges on the inside of here, including these little diagonal ones, and we're going to delete them. But here is where we have a new kind of deleting function, and we're going to talk about this obviously in lesson tomorrow. I'm going to do this here, and then I'm going to do it at the bottom, just so we can do it twice. When you're deleting edges, and I really need this as like a big thing to remember, when you're deleting edges, you don't just hit delete. You don't do that at all. If you're deleting faces, if you're deleting objects in general, yeah, you can hit delete. But when you're deleting edges like this, control backspace. It is a bit of a pain, and I wish that Maya would, the Autodesk team would kind of like make it a bit easier. Maybe have, delete do everything. But for this, we're deleting edges. So whenever you delete edges, control backspace. Control backspace. And I'll do it at the bottom as well. And I'll explain why in a second. I'm not going to leave you hanging. So I'm just going to select all these. Again, this is good practice to, get used to the control. Especially those of you who aren't particularly like PC experienced. I know it's quite common these days that kids coming out of high school and college don't actually have a lot of experience on PCs. But obviously we're working with things as a job, so we got to. So with all those selected, again, including the 2 diagonals in each corner, control backspace. Cool. And then we've got the exact same top and bottom as the other one. Nice and clean. Now, why is this so important? Why am I really going on about the control backspace thing being important? I will show you. I don't know why I've left this up for so long. We'll get rid of that tool. Boom. So if I just make a sphere. Hello, sphere. Right, cool. So I want to get rid of some of these edges for whatever reason. So I come in and I just hit backspace. And I go and a backspace. And I'm going to and a backspace. And I'm going to go and a backspace. And maybe I'm going to do these. Okay. If you notice, it's not actually changed its shape. It's still a sphere. There you go. And if I make another one, so I'm just hitting delete. All I did then was just hit delete. If I do the proper way of doing it on this one, you'll see a bit of a different result. Control backspace. There we go. So the one on the left was deleted. The edges were deleted, or removed, I should say. The edges were removed. Control backspace, the proper way. The one on the right was just hitting delete. So you can see the shape. You can kind of see what an issue is. Now that's not to say that there's no reason to ever just hit delete. This is more of advanced modeling stuff you need to know. You might need to do that. The reason why this is bad is because what is left behind in the background are what we call floating vertexes. So you can see here you got these little purple dots where there once was an edge. That's because whenever you just hit delete on an edge, it just gets rid of the edge, but not the vertexes. So the vertex is still left behind. This is great if you want to reconstruct the geometry but use the same vertex positions for doing whatever. That's what I'm saying. It's an advanced modeling skill because you need to have a lot of experience doing this kind of stuff and a lot of like forward thinking, forethought. But yeah, if you just hit delete, you leave the vertexes behind, and then what that creates is an n-gon. and an n-gon is a 5-sided, or a shape which is 5 sides or more. Quads are king. We must always remember quads are the best thing. Boom. That's a quad. It's awesome. Triangles are okay, but we need to avoid using them. But anything more than 4 sides, that's bad. So what we've got here is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. This is 6 shapes. This is 6 sides. This one, this polygon here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. That is 10 sides. So you can see where the problem lies. N-gons, we don't want n-gons. You can certainly create n-gons, but then you've got to fix them. And we'll come to that further on. Now, you can all take a breath, because actually cleaning this up on an object like this is actually really easy. So if you've accidentally done that and you want something like this, it's really easy. If I just go to vertex mode, select everything, hit delete, now I can hit delete, because what I'm doing is deleting vertexes. It'll get rid of them. But notice how it doesn't delete the vertexes which are actually, quad-based vertexes, quad-creating vertexes. So it is clever enough to understand that anything that's an n-gon, so this vertex here is only being controlled by 2 edges, this and this, whereas this vertex here is being controlled by 1, 2, 3, 4. So it's clever enough to understand, okay, yeah, 2 sides of a vertex, we need to delete that vertex. So I can click that, boom. And it gets rid of them, and now we've got the shape that we want. So remember that whenever you're deleting whenever you're deleting edges, control backspace. Very important. You'll make mistakes on that tons of times. I'll bring you up on it. I'll say like, that's a really weirdly round shape for the edges. The edges that it's got. An edge in 3D is the strongest thing in the universe. You cannot bend an edge. So to have a curvy surface, you have to have more vertexes. The more vertexes, the more smooth it looks. So when you're seeing something really smooth on screen, that's a very dense mesh. But obviously here you can see that polygon separation. So that's why when we're deleting anything like at the top and the bottom there, I want to control backspace, because I don't want floating vertexes or anything. But again, very easy to fix. So, boom. So now I've got my pillars. Okay, so I'm going to keep this one. I'm going to keep the first one I made. I like that one, so I'll get rid of this one. I like how it's a bit asymmetrical. But before I export it now, I'm actually going to add a little bit of detail to it. And then I'm going to have to fix up. I'm going to create some n-gons doing this, but I'm going to fix them up as well. So, what am I doing? This is my object. It's all nice and good, but it's got very, very sharp edges. Very, very sharp edges there, all the way around. Very, very sharp. What I'm going to do is introduce a little bit of roundness to the object. And you don't do this on everything. Anyone who's done 3D modeling before might have had the experience with, the bevel tool and how it can actually destroy your work if you don't know how to use it, or if you get a bit like bevel happy. So what I'm going to do is just round off some of these edges to just make it a bit rounder. If you look at any wall, like I've got my window frame here, and it does look quite sharp, but really that's not a blade-like corner here. I know you can't see it when I'm touching it. It's not a blade-like corner. It's a little bit smooth. We don't have to do this for everything as well. We just need to do it on things that are kind of at a big-ish kind of size. So again, it's a when-and-where situation. So like, you don't have to use bevel all the time to smooth off every edge of the entire model, but in some cases it's going to be quite nice to use. So, what am I going to do? How am I going to do this? What I'm going to do, first of all, is this outer edge here and this outer edge here on this kind of like these sections of the pillar at the top here, I'm going to bevel those. I'm also going to do the same thing at the bottom. Here and here, the outer edges, not the inner edges here, just the outer edges, but not the bottom and not top. So this time. So if I hit bevel now, remember bevel is this guy right here, doubly making sure this time that the edges go all the way around. If they don't go all the way around, you'll have a bad time. So just double, triple check that they're going all the way around. So I'm going to hit bevel, move in a bit closer so I can see it. Hit bevel, and it does this. So obviously that's not what I want, but if I use the fraction, I can bring it in, I can make it smaller. And all I'm doing is I'm not adding tons of edges. I'm not even adding any edges, any more segments than what it gives me. I'm just using the fraction to make this kind of appear to be a bit of a rounder shape. Now, it's a bit hard to get exactly what I want because all these, when I'm using this fraction here, all the snaps are a little bit too kind of drastic. So what I can do is, on this toolbox here, you might see that some of them have like a little pizza looking guy, this little blue thing here, this blue circle. If I click that a few times, you'll see that the little wedge on the inside gets bigger and bigger, and then it gets really small. That's basically how much finesse and control you want. So I've got the smallest cross section there, and now when I move, you'll see that it's a lot more. The movements between the fractions is actually a lot more controllable. If I click the next one, it's more drastic. If I click the next one, again it's more drastic. If I click the last one, it's like super sensitive. So I'm just going to make that the smallest wedge, and I'm just going to... So let's go 0.05, I reckon. Yeah, cool. And now what that does is it kind of rounds off the edge a little bit. And I'm going to come up to the very top and just check how that looks, because obviously I beveled them both at the same time. If you bevel them separate, just make sure you know the number that you're using, because these are technically the same piece of material. When you're constructing these things, you'll have these strips of wood from the same kind of batch, so they'll all have the same kind of curve to the edge. Cool. And the next one I'm going to do is literally across every vertical edge. This will create n-gons at the top and the bottom, we'll see in a second, but again, they're really easy to fix. We're going to do a dirty fix of them as well. So what I'm going to do is just double click this vertical edge here, pop, pop, and then go around shift, double click this one, pop, pop, shift, double click this one, shift, double click this one, like that. So now we've got all the vertical edges going around. And I'm going to do it again. I'm just going to hit that bevel. Obviously it's really big, so then I can decrease that fraction. And I'm just going to, again, add a little bit. So I'm going to go 0.05, see how big that is. So in this case, 0.05, with the default settings, it's a little bit too big. So I'm going to go 0.02. Now the reason why it's different from that first group of bevels to this group is the size of the geometry I'm putting in, the size of the polygons I'm working with. Because now my polygons are much longer and bigger, the fraction is the distance from like one edge to another. So now it's bigger, the fraction is a lot, it doesn't work the same. There are setting changes inside there, we can make it better, but for now, again, we're just going to keep it simple. So what's the 0.02 looking like? 0.015. Yeah, I like 0.015. So now that wall's got a little bit of a softer edge to it. I will have in a bit, because I'm actually going to show us a few nice new tools in here. But yes, I've made n-gons. Where are the n-gons? They're at the top. Right here. So because of these new edges going around the side, these new faces, that's now added 4 more edges going around. So this was once a 4-sided shape. It's now an 8-sided one because we've got the big edges, and then we've got 4 of these little edges here, making 8. 8's a bad number. And we've got that top and bottom. So like I said, it's okay to make n-gons, but you've got to make sure you fix them. And the reason why it's happened here is because the selections I've made going up end right there. It's like a linear path. It's A to B. But going round, they go round and back into themselves. So this kind of loop will create a perfect bevel that just runs around into itself in infinitum. The ones at the top and the bottom, they're caused by the vertical. It goes from one point to another, and that's it. It can't go back on itself. So what I'm going to do is a really easy fix. I'm going to hit delete. Not delete. Don't hit delete. I'm going to hit extrude. And then, without clicking anything else, I'm just going to click this button, merge to center. It's like a big orange disc. This is part of our merge family. It's not a new tool. It's just part of our merge, separate, and combine family of the 5 big tools: extrude, bridge, bevel, merge, combine, separate, add edges. Because remember, add edges. There's like 4 different ways of adding edges, but it's all adding edges. Combine, combine, separate, and merge. They're all in the same family because they're separating bits off, or they're combining things together. They're kind of in the same family. Okay, so I've hit extrude, and then I'm going to click this merge to center, this orange disc right here. And what that does is it brings all those new faces I've just made, these guys, brings them into the center. I'll do the same at the bottom. So I'll select that bottom face, hit extrude, hit merge to center, boom. Now this isn't a particularly perfect way to fix that Ngon problem. This is just really quick solutions, because there's another way of doing that which is more professional, but it can take a little bit of time, especially when you're new to modeling. It can be a little, it's very intricate. But for this, that's all we're going to do for now. We can always fix it up later on. Cool. Awesome. So now that's our pillar done. Kind of. You could export the pillar as it is now, and totally fine, and do what I'm about to do later on. But what I'm going to do here, change the background so it's a bit easy to see, is I'm going to make this look even smoother and kind of a little bit higher res. Not really by doing anything geometric to it, but changing the way it appears. So here you can see very sharp edges where I've added those bevels and stuff. Very, very sharp edges. And we want to make sure that it doesn't look that sharp. We want to have it look like it's a little bit more smoother, and we can do that. So what I'm going to do is select the object in its entirety, mesh display, soften edge. So if at this point you're still kind of like, okay, I'm getting my head around that bevel section, I need to redo the pillars. Stop the video, make a note of the timestamp for come to the next bit. But if you're confident with it, let's go do this. So what I'm going to do, like I said, mesh display, soften edges. What that does, it doesn't actually soften the geometry. What it does is it softens the normals. You might have heard me say this a couple of times so far. The normals. So mesh display, soften edge. You see how everything is really smooth? That's because what I've told the mesh to do is to blend between edges. So instead of having like, this is a flat plane, it's only facing that direction, and then the plane next to it that's slightly on a different angle, it goes, now this plane is just this and it's facing forwards. You'll have very sharp cuts like we had then. That's what's happening here. The normals of each edge and vertex and polygons and all that kind of stuff, they're all basically saying, no, I'm facing this direction. And you get these very hard separations. But if you soften edge, what this does is basically say all those edges, no, blend together a little bit, merge those normals. But it gets a little bit too smooth. You can see that places like here, where the pillar attaches to these kind of like sideboard looking guys, it's very soft, and we don't actually have a separation. So on the corners, I like how that looks, I like how that looks, I like how that looks. But where these things are meeting each other, I don't like how that looks. It's too soft. So what I'm going to do is sharpen those edges or harden those edges. So now I'm going to tell these edges to, right, when the edge here, when the polygon ends here, we're going to put a sharp line. So I'm going to just, at this very top one, I'm going to double click this edge here, which is the one that's basically attaching to the next skirt board there, and then the edge which is attaching the skirting board to the geometry, to the pillar, harden edge. So now you can see what happens there. Now it looks a little bit more geometric. It looks a little bit more kind of high resolution. Not costing me anything. Now this isn't how games, how everything looks high res in games. This isn't done for everything. There are more advanced modeling techniques that we'll be looking at later on, and in the second year you're going to be going into. This is just our way of doing this. And then at the top, I'm going to do the same thing. Now this is a problem. See how that's like really weird? Like this is, ooh, that's kind of a bit weird. That's because a 90-degree angle is really hard to make look smooth if you've only got one edge. Because this has only got one edge here going round. So it's very hard for the light to bend across that smoothly, so it struggles. So what we're going to do is just select all the edges going around the top there, and all I've done is let's just double click it. It goes all the way around. Mesh tools, sorry, display mesh, harden edge, boom. And now look at that. Now we have a nice sharp edge. And I go down to the bottom, I do the exact same thing. So the point where the pillar meets the first small skirting board, the point where the skirting board meets the second skirting board, and the bottom, so I can just double click all those, shift double click all those, so I got them all selected. mesh displays, hardened edge. Boom. And now the whole mesh looks just a little bit more high res for the cost of a few polygons. Now, if you don't want to do that yet, if you just want to concentrate on the basics, go for it. We're going to be eventually doing this, but, you know, whatever. If you're feeling a bit spicier, you're feeling a bit more confident, give this a go. But like I said, we don't do that kind of thing for everything. Again, when we come to these kind of things, we'll talk about it then. But boom, that's done. Now, look at all this history. This is not a lot of history, but look at all this history here. So this is everything from the birth of the object to what I've just done. It's all inside here. So I obviously don't want any of that information getting out into the game engine, because it might possibly mess stuff up. And I also don't want any information here, so what do? Delete history. Cleans that up nicely. Freeze transformation. Now everything here is zeroed out, and obviously my scale is 1. And I can export this, so this is SM pillar A. I can export that selection, that file, SM underscore pillar underscore A. Send that out. Cool. Back into the game engine. I'm going to make a new folder for this. So I've got floors, I've got walls. For me, a pillar is structural, so I'm going to have structural. There you go. Structural. So I'm going to put it in there. And I might have other pillars. I might have things that I use to put against walls. I might have other... Oh, you know, I've got my beams going across the roof. All those, for me, are going to go inside there. So I drag it in from that folder. Obviously, it'll remember the settings. Skadoosh. There we go. And then I can start dragging it in. Whoop. And obviously, I start using it to build my scene. Press play. Oh, there we go. Have a look. See how it feels. It feels nice. The scaling looks good. Quinn doesn't look dwarfed or too tall against it, so I'm quite happy with that. And then you can start building that inside your scene. Control Shift S. And also remembering to any new assets, bring them into your asset library. So my geometry, all my floors are in there. My wall, so I've got that new window, so I'll bring that in. And then I've got my pillar, so I'll go to structural and then bring that in. Let's put that. I'll put that over here for now, because I don't really know what I'm going to put it now, so I'm going to put it there for now. So, you know, it makes sense being with the walls, doesn't it? So I'll just put it over there for now. There. Boom. Enough faffing. So I'm updating my asset library as I'm adding stuff. Cool. Now, what I'm going to do is, you know, continue doing that, making our bounding boxes, so we're getting dimensions of chairs, tables, TVs, whatever, sideboards, and building those like we did do in class. Carry on. I do need stairs, so while I'm here, I might as well make some stairs. So I'll just move you over there. Stairs. So we had this big long talk about stairs, and you've got to look at the kind of place that you're building. Is it a very, very tight environment? Is it a very broad environment? Is it an area of an environment which has got a lot of public foot traffic, or is it kind of like a home or something? All these inform you the kind of stairs you're going to make. We talked about terrace houses, especially northern terrace houses, the 2 up, 2 down, old coal mining kind of houses. If you go into those houses, the stairs are very steep because they're not very wide, and the stairs aren't going from the front to the back; they're going across the building, so they've got to be quite steep. And they're also the steps themselves are relatively, like, the depth of each step is actually relatively quite shallow. But then if you look at like hotels, museums, anything which is very, very public, the steps are going to be big, and sometimes each step is maybe like a couple of meters deep because it's like, you know, it's palatial, it's nice, it fits the aesthetic. Office building or places like with a lot of foot traffic, like professional environments, you'll have very, very simple stairs, but the steps will be a little bit deeper. Not mega deep, but a little bit deeper, so that to accommodate safety and stuff. And then you can look at like the noses of steps, which is a little overhang. But for now, what I'm going to do is just make some simple steps that are going to go inside my environment. In class, again, we talked about mine are going to be these wooden log cut in half kind of steps, but at first what I want to do is have just a basic version of them, because again, I don't want to spend ages making a model only to realize it's all buggered up and I've got to delete it because it's so messed up, whatever. Go simple. So what I'm going to do is go about things a little bit differently at first. I'm going to, first of all, research into how big my step is, look into the depths, use Manny as a bit of a a scaling guide. So bring him in like that. I'm just going to move him back as well to about where the step's going to be, like that. Yeah. Cool. And what I'm going to do this time is I'm going to make a cube, but not clicking and dragging like that. I'm going to do it a little bit differently. Not for any reason, just, this is just another way of making this geometry. So I'm not going to hold shift, but I am going to do is hold X. And I'm going to hold X, drag from the middle of the world out. And what it does, it starts to create the space I want to make, the shape I want to make, but it's snapping it to the grid, which is nice. So I'm going to drag it out to the width. So I'm going to make this, obviously, 2 meters wide, but then 3 of these units deep. Like that. I could go 2, go 3. I'll go 3. I could always adjust this later on. I'm just, putting this in. Now when I release, it says drag up to create height. So I'm going to drag up a little bit like that. And then I'm going to do extrusion from here and drag back another 3 units. So extrude. Just press W for my normal movement tool. Hold X. I'm going to drag back 3 units. Do that again. Hit extrude. Press W just for my normal movement tool. Hold X. Drag back 3 units. So I've got 3 equal steps because I think it's going to be a 3-step thing. I know this because obviously we did it in class. So I'm going to make my steps from here. But I'm going to be a bit clever. I'm going to use some nice little functions inside here. Nice little tricky, not hidden, but interesting functions. So I want this first step, or at least all the steps at the minute, all of them, I want them to be a certain height. And I know this, that I landed on 18.75 centimeters up from the ground. So my first step is going to be 18.75 centimeters deep, and then my next one's going to be double that, and my next one's going to be adding an extra one on. So how I make sure that's perfect is this little guy up here. So it's this little docked menu. So when you got your cinema clackers here, it could be like a little stick with an arrow on. That's a hidden kind of docked function. If I click that, I've got these 3 boxes, X, Y, Z. And I want to make sure that in the Y position, it's at the exact height I want it to be. So making sure I've got W for my movement kind of selected. That middle box there, I want to put 18.75. Boom. And that moves up. So now that is 18.75 centimeters above the middle of the ground. And then I'm going to grab the next 2 steps, extrude. I'm just going to move them up a little bit just to make sure I've 100% got these in the right position. Oh, make sure I've got the right assets, the elements selected. Now, I'm going to get a calculator here because I'm bad at maths. So 18.75, I'll bring it on screen so you can see, times 2 is 37.5. So now these are going to be in the y-axis 37.5. And then the next one here, the last step, I'm going to extrude, just move it up a little bit so at least I know that I've got it. And then I'm going to add another 18.75 to top of this. 36.25. Cool. 56.25. Boom. There we go. So now I've got 3 steps that are 30 centimeters deep and 18.5 centimeters at each height. If you know the depth of your steps to the precise number, you can do that. Each step is going to be X amount of units. So you have to do the same thing, but just going in one straight line backwards. Boom. I'm happy with that. These are proxy stairs as well. I'm not going to do any special modeling on these. These are purely just to have a step. There we go. We're going to hold up, put the pivot point in the middle of the world. Delete history, freeze transformation. Give it a name. SM_stairs_A. Now these are quite shallow stairs, so these are going to be going in the main room, and these are like descending from one slight elevation down or going up or whatever. If I wanted to make stairs that looks like they're going up, I've then got to think about the angle, because if I try to make these go up to the next floor essentially, if I just do a little bit of, there we go, boom, boom. So if I do like just one more. Alright. So maybe that's the whole height to get up to the next floor. That's a very long staircase. Very, 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 very long staircase. That's not how it's generally that's not how these stairs are gonna kind of be built. They're gonna be a little bit more steeper so that the depth is not quite as extreme. But again, that's down to research, looking, and just experimenting. But for now, I'm just gonna use these steps. So Control X back into the grid. There you go. Yeah. Export that as sm_stairs_a. Boom. So now they're in my little folder I've got to the side. I can jump into Unreal. I'm going to make a new folder, call it stairs. You could put them in structural if you want to, but I'm going to call them stairs. And drag them in. Yep. And then I can drag them into the scene. I'm going to put them like here next to the steps, like that. Boom. So there's my steps. And I can bring those into the scene. Cool. Control Shift S. I can go back to the main level, and then I can start bringing them in, and obviously, changing slight elevations. Now, obviously, we're not talking about making separate floors. We're only sticking to one floor, and this 25 by 25 meter kind of like area bounding box. But what we can do is have slight elevations. So maybe you walk in, you enter the cabin for the entrance, and maybe it's like what, 1.5 foot high kind of rise, and you walk down into the rest of the room. Or maybe you walk down or up into the kitchenette, you walk down into the fireplace area. It's just like elevations. It adds a bit of interest. It gives you free real estate. It also will present as a bit of a nice problem to have to solve later on. Now, when it comes to making more ornate steps here, all I've got to do is basically know that my step depth is going to be 30 units, or that's 30 centimeters, and obviously 2 meters wide. Oh, so 15, it'll be 15 that, boom. There we go. That should be the width of that. I'm just kind of testing my stuff. I'm testing something so I don't make myself look stupid. About that, yeah. So I can just eyeball this in. Scale it up a little bit. Again, doesn't have to be perfect. Things like that. As long as I can make sure it's obviously the right width. You could do it like that. However you want to do. Whatever your steps are going to be. But for now, that's my steps. So I've got steps, pillars, walls, doors. I can start building a lot of stuff. And obviously when you start the bounding boxes or the basic shapes, your tables and chairs and stuff, you start filling up the environment. Now, when you start filling up the environment, let me just do a quick save here, you're going to end up in the blocking phase having a lot of grey boxes that will have really janky UVs. You'll see that some of these are like smeared and stuff here. At this point, it's not an issue at all. And if you're okay with this, totally fine. But obviously, we're going to be UVing stuff later on. But as you're building stuff, it can get a little bit like ugh to look at. So what we can do is create a function. And again, this is if you're at the end of the video now, this is that thing I was talking about. This is the feeling a little bit spicy. I want to do something cool with the engine stuff. It's very good for us artists to do this. We can create a little function inside Unreal to help us assign materials to a lot of objects at the same time, because normally you have to go through and assign them individually. I've been using Unreal for years, and I can't find a function, unless I'm just being super blind, I can't find a function that's already built in where you can just basically select a bunch of objects. Oh, I should go to wall, shouldn't I? Select a bunch of objects at the same time and assign a material to them. You can do things like asset actions, editing property matrix, and you get this up. But I can't find, there's nothing to do with materials inside here. Again, unless I'm being stupid, which is probably the case, but stupid. What this has made me do is say, okay then, let's look to see if there's a function that a thing I can make myself, a little function, and I found one online. So what I'm going to do is create that function and show you what it does, but I will show it you on a different scene, a better scene, so you can see how the power of it. So I'll be back in a second. Okay, so I've got this little project I've been working on. I don't know if I've shown it in class. This is like a little, it's not a serious project. I had it's like 3-4 hours, and I just bush them together. All these asset pieces, but if we look closely, we can see none of it's UV. It's all very dirty geometry, but it's all a bit ugly as well. You know, we got all these stretches. It's a bit ugh. We got especially like this bit. You see with that tearing in the texture, and obviously this bit here. It's a bit ugly, which means when I'm actually in the game itself, there's my level. There's my level. And I'm playing. It's very ugly. You know, it's very, very ugly. Now, I've found this function online. I didn't create it myself, I have to say. I don't know actually who created it. But I found this function online that allows me to assign materials across multiple different objects all at the same time. So, we obviously need a material. And a material is a collection of images that create the overall appearance of something. It can be as simple as just a single like color texture, and that'll give the color to something, and then we can go more advanced with the stuff we add into it, so we can actually make really kind of complex looking materials. When we come up to materials, this will all again make sense. But a basic material, I can just add a color to something, and this is good because I can actually color code stuff. Not make it a clown kind of affair where everything's got a crazy color on it, but maybe I'll put a color on certain items that I know, like, okay, that red one is going to be an interactable object. This blue one is all my interactable doors are blue, something like that. It's like a debugging thing for us, because you're going to be looking at a lot of grey boxes at first, so it helps. So, it's right here. So I'll show you what it is first of all. And if anyone's done blueprinting in college or in their own time or anything, this might not shock you. Some of you might be like, "Oh my god, what am I ever going to do?" So this is everything that just does what I'm about to do there. Well, this is everything. Sorry, somebody caught me eye then. This is everything that allows me to apply materials to all one object. It's a very basic function, and I'm looking into kind of enhancing it and making it a bit more robust. But for now, this is all we're going to do. So feel free to do this. Follow along with me, obviously. But what this is we create a function. This is, well, we create the function. So we create a function. We're going to do it in a second, and then we basically say, right, when that function begin transaction, we basically look at the selected object we have selected. And this is basically, I can't explain what this does exactly in this function, but this basically allows us to Control Z back. So that, you know, if we make a mistake, we can Control Z it back. This is what this does, and then we either end the transaction like we're done now. Well, when we're completed, we end the transaction, but then we cast to, or we talk about the objects we got selected. In this case, the static meshes, because that's what they are, and then we interact with that object, and then we set the material. So let's make that, and I'm actually going to go into my scene like here to do it. So it's you know, I'm not duplicating off another in the same world. Okay, move all that to the side. There we go. Right, so creating this change material function, I'm going to make a new folder, and I'm going to call this blueprint _ utility, or utility blueprint, because this is what it is, utility, like that. And I'm also going to make a new folder, call it material. I've already done that here. I've made this right click, make a folder, call it material. And in here, I'm going to make a material. This isn't a material class. I'm just going to show you how to do something very basic, and then we'll be done with it. I'm going to make a couple of materials. So I'm going to say right click, and then on this menu here, I've got material. And so the name convention for materials is dead easy. If it's a material, it's M underscore or whatever. So M underscore debug. So I know that this isn't going to be an end using, we're not going to have this at the very end. This is purely just to debug. And debugging is just like problem solving, problem checking, whatever, you know, solutions. Underscore, let's call it blue. Guess what color that's going to be. I'm going to do another one. I'm going to call this M because it's material, debug because it's one of these, it's just a checking material. I'm going to call it red. Cool. So boom, we've made two materials. Right click material, that's all you got to do. You can also click this button here and then do it from there. But if we double click on one of these materials, so double click that blue, you'll get this. And I'm not going to go over what's happening here. All I want us to do is change this top color here. You can literally click on this little box to the side of it. This little this color box here. So base color. Base color is the base color or something. Double click it and you get this, and just pick a color. So this is blue. So I'm going to go to my blues and I'm going to make it about that. I'm not going to make it primary blue, like, because it can just get, it gets annoying to the eyes, that kind of stuff. So I'm just going to make it a blue and click OK. Now, those of you who've ever used Unreal for the past like 2, 3, 4 years, you'll know that in the past we've had to make a separate kind of node cluster to make a color. The ones who have never touched Unreal before, you don't know how lucky you are that now that all the functions, all the base functions, the normal functions, are now as like little boxes now. Normally we'd have to make, if we just want like a single value or something, we'd have to make a box out here and plug it in, which is not hard. It's just a bit of a pain in the ass. But now boom, we've got that base color. That's blue. That's all I want. And I'm going to hit apply up here. Saves it, close it, there you go, and I'm going to do the same thing for red. I'm going to double click red, and then here on, so this is the material return, double click at the top where it says base color. I'm just going to move it towards red, and I'm going to give it a kind of red color, click OK, not like a pinky, but whatever, it's red. There you go. So I've got 2 colors. Awesome. So I've got those set up just so I don't have to do them later on. So I'll go back to my content drawer. Inside that blueprint utility, I'm going to go in there. And in obviously the content drawer here, I'm going to right click. And I'm not going to go up to blueprint class. Those of you who've done blueprint in the past or whatever, I'm not going to do that. What I'm going to do is go down to editor utilities. And I'm going to go down to editor utility blueprint, because we're making a utility in the editor, which is a blueprint. Boop. And what I'm going to do is add an asset action utility. So actually we're doing something to an object. So click. There we go. And this I'm going to call BPU, because it's a blueprint utility, underscore change material. There you go. So I know what it does. And I'll double click and open that. So, yeah, if you've never done blueprinting before, obviously you don't have to do this. This is just like I said, if you feel spicy enough, you can do this. If you don't do this through the entire year, nothing's going to happen. This is just a cool thing you can do, which is going to help you out. And maybe take you forward into other projects. And it's simple enough that you can just kind of like do it again for another project. So what I've got to do, first of all, is create the function. Create that that purple function here, the change of material. I'm going to create that. So what I'll do, on the left hand side in this little menu here, I've got function. If I just click the little plus icon to the side of it, I make a new function. Hey! I'm going to go to change material. This is basically giving it a package, a name, a house. This is the thing that kind of gets looked at the end. It's the thing that kind of creates everything. You'll notice how I'm very confident in explaining stuff in 3D. Blueprinted stuff, I'm not as confident explaining it, so I might, I don't know, say something strange. So, this little icon, this little triangle here, this is like an executing wire, let's say. So, again, if we bring this in, you'll notice how this white wire goes from node to node to node to node. It splits off a little bit, but it goes from one to the other. It's basically the order of call. So change function does this, then this, then this, then this. If one of these isn't connected to the thing next to it, it's going to stop there, and it's not going to then translate onto the rest of them. The other little wires are basically controls, functions, not options, but like settings, values. So from here, we want to drag out, and I'm going to search in this little box that comes up, begin transaction. So if I begin tran, it'll filter it down to begin transaction, like that. So we've started the transaction. The context, I'm going to call this change material. And the description, I'm going to change static mesh material. So this is basically the name of the function, and this is, when you hover over it, it says what it does. And the primary object is self, and not self as in me or self as in the user, but self as in the thing that is selected. So I'm going to just drag off where it says primary object at the bottom. I'm just going to drag off from this little blue pin or blue socket, and I'm just going to type in self. and I get reference to self. So basically it says we'll start transaction on this thing itself, being our static meshes. From there, we go on to get selected asset. So we drag off this pin and we type in get selected assets right there. So again, we've selected all our multiple things. It gets those assets like that. And then from there, we drag out again and we type in for each loop like that. And I'm going to drag value return here off this get selected. This is called an array. When you get this little box of like 8 dots, it's called an array. So I'm going to drag that off and plug it into the array. An array is a selection of stuff. You can have an array of characters is multiple characters. An array of selections is multiple selections. So it's getting all those. It's getting the selected values or selected assets. Like that. And then at the bottom, what I'm going to do is drag off. So when completed, so once we've done all this, we'll return to this. Obviously, after all this function is done, it kind of returns to this. But when we've completed the action, we will end the transaction. So the material begins, or the material is created in the world. It begins transaction. What's it called? It's called change material, and its description is change the static mesh material, and it's looking at the objects we've got selected. So it gets the selected objects, which are an array, so multiples, or can be an array, multiples, and then it starts the function. So this is going to loop around essentially. It's not going to bring another wire back, but everything I drag out from this top wire here essentially loops back in itself, so I can do like Control Z's and stuff. And then when I've completed this function, it ends. It completes it. It closes the window and stuff. So if I drag out from this, I'm going to cast to static mesh. Cast to static mesh. And what cast means is we're interacting with that thing now. We're looking at that thing. The functions I'm about to do are on that object. In this case, it's static mesh. Now, the static mesh is the object. When we look at our objects in the content drawer, you'll see at the bottom it says static mesh. So those are classed as static meshes. And array elements, I'm just going to drag this into object, like that. And then I'm going to drag out of here. I'm going to go to transact. So transact object. So just transact. Just make sure we're filtering it properly. Transact object, like that. And I'm going to drag out from array element to that object. So we're pulling from that array the multiple selections. When we start this, the cast to object here, that object, is part of this array here. And then obviously here we're transacting with that object from the array. And then I'm going to drag out from there, and I'm going to go set material. How do I put a space in it? Okay, brain fart over. I completely forgot an annoying little. It's not a bug by any sense. It's just the way that blueprinting kind of works. So yeah, I can't get this function by dragging off and searching it from the execution pin. I can only find it by dragging off from this static mesh. So this cast to static mesh here, I can only find it off here. So as a static mesh. So I'm going to drag off from there. Set material. There it is. Boom. And then I can hook that up to this transact object. Like that. And then from the new material at the bottom here, I'm going to drag that all the way to the beginning. I'm just going to hover over the change material, the little purple node at the beginning. I'm going to drop that in there. You can see it actually makes a new node for us. I'm going to click on that, and then you can see in inputs we've got new material. I'm just going to put a space in there, so that's basically the name of our function, new material. And that's it. It's a little bit spaghetti-like. It's not needed for what we do. Like if you don't do it, it's totally fine. And it's not going to be useful for when we come to do like the full-on materials. We've got multiple materials per object and all this kind of jazz. It's really good for doing one material on a lot of different things, which might be the case. You might have objects which just have one material on them, but you might have a lot of them that share the same material. And then through UV usage, they all kind of use different sections of the material. This is basically something called trim sheeting. We'll talk about that later. So there are needs for it, but I find it really good for just doing these initial kind of just throwing on all materials at the same time. Cool. So let's go over what we've done there. So we've made a function by clicking on this little function icon up here, called it change material. From there, we've drug out from the execution pin, searched for begin transaction to begin the transaction, begin the function we're doing. And then we've named the context change material. That's what we're doing. And then the description is change static mesh material. Well, so when you hover over it, it basically gives you a little description. And then the primary object, we've drug out from that little pin and just search self, and that's we get reference from self. So we drag out and we type self in, we get reference to self. That basically just says you're referencing the function, you're referencing yourself. We're not referencing something else from other places. So when we get selected assets, so we drag out from the execution pin on this one, we get selected assets, and then when we have those selected assets, they get pulled from an array. So we take this return value array and drag it into the array function of this for loop. So when we get those, we start running the function. So we're looping through this. So this essentially comes back on itself invisibly. And then we also drag out from completed. When we've completed this function, we clicked OK or whatever, we end transaction. That stops it. That completes the tool. But from that loop body, we drag out. We say cast to static mesh, and then we connect the array element to the object, because we're casting to that object from the array, from the group that we've selected. From that execution pin, we drag out and we look for transact object. Basically, start again to we're transacting with these objects. And here's what just tripped me up then. We don't drag out from this execution pin to get the set material. Annoyingly, we have to drag out from this as static mesh. We set that material. So drag out from this guy here. Set material. And then you get it right there. And then we can hook that up to transact material. This target should be hooked up to static mesh. And then we just take this new material here and we just drag it all the way back to this initial function at the beginning. That'll create that new material, which is obviously what it's called here, new material. And just if you click on the function, you can just put a space in between new and material to give it, separate off. And that's it. So you give it a save. You hit compile at the top here. This is where this little question mark is. Hit compile. We save. And we can close that now. The function is actually done. All good. So we've made our materials. We've made a simple blue material by going, right-clicking, making a material folder, right-clicking, going to material, making that, calling it M. I'm calling mine debug blue because it's a debug material. It's going to be gone at the end. And then inside there, if I double-click on it, we just go to the base material or the base color, and then just double-click on the little box, change the code to what you want, save that at the top left, and then you can close that. I did that a couple of times. So now what we can do, and I'm kind of like, this is the point where I'm hoping that what I've just done actually works. So if I go to my walls, for instance, I should be able to select all these. So I'm clicking one, holding shift, clicking the rest of them. If I right click, we have this scripted assets action. This is new because there was no scripted asset actions before because we hadn't created any. Now that we have, this new function arrives, or this new option in this little drop down arrives, and we have change material. So if I click that change material, we'll get this box up. So this is a new material, and all I'm going to do is click on this little drop down, find my debug blue, click it, click OK, and then all the walls change to blue. There we go. And then I can go to my content, and I'll say, okay, let's pretend that red is applied to a function. Maybe all my pillars are destructible. If this was a game with destructible kind of physics, shatter and all that kind of stuff, maybe everything that's got those functions on it will be red, so that the game designers, level designers, us as artists know that is destined for destruction. So if I go to geometry, I go to structural, I right click, It'll be good if there was tons of these to make it look cool. But again, scripted asset actions, change material, change that to be the red. Click OK. Change this to red. And because we're changing it inside here, not inside the actual window here, every version of this pillar in the scene gets changed. Boom. So if I go back to that scene here, my little plumber scene, I go to my asset library. Save. There we go. So yeah, you can see that all these are very, very horrible geometry. No UV whatsoever. It's all horrible. And if I go to my assets and I will go to my pipes, you can see I've got a fair few pipes here. And what I used to do is literally go into each one of them. So double click it, go into it, and then I'd change the material here for each one of them, and that would take time. So what I can do now is literally click and then shift click on the one I want, like the ones I want, so I want all of them. Right click, go to asset actions, change material, and I've got this debug white material here. Oh no, I've got to make that material. This is not in this save apparently. Material, there we go. So in here, I can material m_debug grey. There we go. So in that, double click on the little square in the base color, change that to a darker color, grey, like that. Apply and save, right there. There we go. So now that's there in my folders. So yeah, I go back to my assets, my pipe, select all them, right click, scripted assets action, get material, and assign that mdebug grey. So then everything, when I click it, boom. So the UVs are still all squanched. They're still crap. But what this does is just puts a flat colour on everything at the same time. So it's a little bit better to look at. A little bit better to look at. So when I play the level now properly, I'm not going to have horrible smeared grey textures. Now I've got... Did I not save that? I saved it. Or is it kind of updating? Oh no, these are the wall sections. So now all the pipe sections have got this white material on them. I've not done it on my wall section. Maybe I might have a different colour for them to show you that obviously it's a room section. Maybe all my room section are blue, and all my pipe sections are white, and all my water sections are green. So then I get a visual idea about what the layout of the level is. So it's a very, very fun tool. If you you don't have to use it if you don't want to. If you want to just like, no, I'm not going to bother doing that. Totally fine. Awesome. But if you're like, yeah, I kind of like to get into a little bit of this tech arty kind of stuff, even in these early stages, that's a little bit. This is going down the route of tech art. And tech art is, yes, it is creating assets and stuff, but it's also creating tools to make your life a little bit easier, to make the studio life a bit easier. I said before, I'm looking to investigate into this a little bit more. So what I want to do is, can I change the material? But what it'll do, I don't know how feasible this is. It will give me all the materials assigned to each one of the objects in parameters, and I can basically assign in like material slot 1, everyone is going to be this, and it updates all that. So basically get access to all the materials per object in one place instead of having to go through and faff. How feasible that is, I don't know. It's just an experiment. I personally feel I need to get more into the tech art kind of stuff because that's, I like the technical side of stuff, but the artistic side of me is also loving what I'm doing. So, let's do a little review. So what have we spoke about today? Well, we spoke about, there's that my scene. We spoke about how we can take our simple walls here and create simple windows, simple doors. We reminded ourselves how to do those, and that is either doing the extrusion method like this one, where we just select the two faces, use the offset to bring it in, delete the middle, fill in, bridge, and that's that. Or we can create a doorway this way, and this is using the Mesh Tools Connect, and basically deciding horizontally we want one edge, vertically we want two edges, again making the door shape, deleting them in the inside, flattening those angles down so that it's flat to the scene, flat to the floor, and then bridging the open edges on the inside. And how you could do that for a window as well. We spoke about making the stairs. We were doing that by we knew they wanted to be 2 meters wide, and after experimentation, at least the initial idea is to make them 30 centimeters deep per step and 18.75 centimeters high per step. So then, holding X, dragging out that initial shape, dragging up, and then with that top face selected, using this lovely little group of boxes up here to say, right, that one is going to be 18.75 centimeters high, boom, and then extruding back. And, again, that was all partway through the video then. And also the cool little fun things we did with this pillar to take something which is essentially just an elongated cube and making it just a little bit more fancy looking, using some extrusion techniques, either extruding inwards or extruding outwards, fixing the n-gons or fixing the faces at the top, using the bevel very, very simply just to add a little bit of information, or a little bit of smoothness really, not information, but it's making stuff look a little bit smoother. So it looks like this is rolled wood. And then, yeah, fixing the n-gons that would be on top and bottom the dirty way, so that's not the very professional way. But again, we're doing things in small little batches. Then obviously bringing them in. And then we made that lovely little blueprint utility for everyone who's feeling a bit spicy. And that's it. And we can start to really expedite our modeling process. We're starting to get bits in. We're starting to get blocks in. Cubes and cuboids or cylinders that represent certain shapes, certain objects. We can start filling in, feng shuiing the scene, getting it nice and cluttered, because this is going to be a cluttered environment. And we start, obviously getting roofs on, getting structural stuff in there, start walking around. The more we fill it in, the better it'll look. Or the better it'll feel as well. And then when we can start modeling deeper into stuff, everything will start to just come to life. And then we can start doing materials and everything will just really come to life. And then we'll add lighting and post-processing, maybe a little bit of VFX, and everything will just sing. And then we'll do our end renders and it'll look sick. It's very exciting. And we've already looked at the most technical thing as well, by the way. That blueprint utility is the roof of how technical we're going to get this year, and that's even optional as well. You don't have to do that, like I said. So the next stuff we're going to be looking at is obviously looking at materials. We're going to be looking at I'm going to be doing structural stuff a bit more, so how I thought about making the cross beams. They're essentially just X amount of centimeters wide, X amount of centimeters deep, and 4 meters wide, or 2 meters, whatever. Again, experiment. We're going to be looking at all that kind of stuff. And then we're going to be looking at, obviously, refining our sculptures. We're going to be looking at tables and chairs, making those look really good. And it's going to be great. And UVing and stuff, the wonderful world of UVing. So cool. Bit of a long one on that one. Again, all my videos are going to be fairly long videos because we're going to go over a lot of stuff. We're going to be doing a lot of that recapping. So we'll do something, then we'll recap, then we'll do it again. Repetition. Cool. So I'll see you in the next one.